my wife and I were sitting down to watch a Christmas movie, and we pulled one up from like Amazon Prime or something, and it was called Holiday in Handcuffs. It was atrocious, Aaron. It was the worst holiday movie I've ever seen. I couldn't get through more than 15 minutes. So that was my like two-factor authentication for my wife, where I was like, what was the name of the movie that we started to watch, but it was just really bad.
Jared, welcome to the Point of Impact.
Aaron, thanks so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be
You
here.
know, I'm excited to have you. I've heard a lot of great things. I love your own podcast and the kind of things you're sharing on both the podcast and on your Instagram. And it's not just you as a physical trainer, uh, but it's a lot of mindset. And you have a very interesting story. So a lot of people, a lot of people know that being physically fit, like the negative connotations. If you're not physically fit, there are uh, it is a detractor. It hurts your health. But on the flip side, being physically fit can be not just good for you, but can actually save your life. So I know plenty of stories for being in the military of service members who were also very fit, had a lot of muscle on them, and it saved their life literally by muscle mass catching frag that would have otherwise killed them. And for me in particular, when I was still active duty, I had a piece of fragmentation that was caught right in my neck, just millimeters from the carotid artery, and it was my neck muscle that stopped it. You, on the other hand, you have a similar type story, but not literally. Your fitness saved your life in another way. Can you tell me about that?
Absolutely. And, with you, you hit it right on the head in terms of strength and fitness, saving my life in a way I never expected to. I think it punctuates it just the same, if not more, especially thinking about, your story and those of service members, when it comes to whether it's combat or otherwise. These are just things that you probably hope you never have to cash in on as far as insurance policies. But if you do, you really hope it's a good one. And for me, I'm a physical therapist, I'm a powerlifter, powerlifting coach. I've been practicing physical therapy for almost 10 years, been training since I was 16, so it's 17 years total at this point. And last year, uh, really what seemed like out of the blue, I started getting sick, and it seemed like just a head cold. And I didn't think too much of it because my daughters and my wife all got sick at the same time. It was early January, so, 'twas the season. But a week later or so, they got better, and I was getting worse. So I kept getting worse, and ultimately, about 3 weeks after things began, I was in the hospital um, with organ failure. Within 6 days, I was on life support, and on life support for 5 weeks, and it ended up being the result of a really rare and deadly autoimmune condition called HLH. And I went into the ICU weighing about 193 pounds. I woke up because I was very heavily sedated through the majority of that, weighing about 150. So I was so sick that I couldn't actually get the proper or full doses of the chemo or the treatment that I needed. And I was also so sick that even though they had a tube going through my nose down to my stomach, I couldn't receive nutrition. Just I wasn't able to handle it apparently. So my body needed something to keep it ticking, and in those situations, it'll turn to muscle. So muscle and strength quite literally saved my life in that way.
Wow. So you tell me a little bit more about this HOH. What's that stand for? And what was your body doing? You said it wouldn't accept nutrition. You couldn't feed yourself. So your body started eating away. What nutrition you had was the muscle.
Yeah, exactly. So HLH. if anybody's keeping track on their bingo cards at home, is it stands for hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, and it's a condition that can be either primary or secondary. Primary is genetic, which I didn't have. Most of the time, when it's genetic, um, it shows up in newborns or infants. Mine was secondary, but what happens is the immune system starts to attack healthy cells, especially red blood cells. And for secondary HLH, it can be secondary to an infection, which was my case. I picked up an infection of the Epstein-Barr virus, which is a sneaky one apparently, because you can pick it up and it can lie dormant for a period of time, and you don't necessarily know that you have it. Um, or it can be secondary to cancer or another autoimmune disease. So, as far as what my body was doing, the progression, like when things started to show that it wasn't the typical head cold, I had insomnia. I was going through wildly swinging fevers and chills, um, and my lymph nodes all through my neck, they swelled up where it felt like I was running my fingers over a little mini mountain range. So we went to one hospital. It was a smaller one near the town where I live, and got diagnosed with mononucleosis. So we knew there was an infection. Got a medication for the insomnia. Went back home. Wasn't getting better. Was actively getting worse. And my wife looked at me at a certain point and she said, "You're yellow." So my skin was going jaundiced, showing that my liver was failing. So that organ failure happened, or it affected my liver, my kidneys. I needed to be on dialysis when I got into the ICU. Um, my spleen was massive compared to what it should be, and I was just the stress of all of the disease processes was so much that, again, I'm going off of what the doctors told me, because I went in delirious already because it was affecting everything, and then woke up weeks later. And from what the doctors, nurses told me, my wife and my parents, I was so sick that not only could I not get the full treatment, but also couldn't eat. Not only because I was sedated, but also for whatever reason they just couldn't put the nutrition into me, or I wasn't able to absorb it, probably because of that organ failure.
So I imagine you were intubated, and so how long were you sedated? Were you under?
Uh, Total in the ICU on life support was about 5 weeks. The sedation would vary day to day. So it was very much a day to day or even hour to hour kind of situation where um, it depended on how I was doing, what the blood tests, and they were drawing blood every 6 hours. My arm at one point was totally bruised up because of all the draws.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, they would vary the level of sedation. Apparently, they told my wife that the medications would affect people differently. For some, it made them very, very calm, very docile. For others, it made them paranoid. And I was in the second category. So it led to some situations where, I mean, we might talk more about it later, but as far as what I recall from that time, it's more in the form of dreams, really weird dreams, which I imagine is just my brain trying to process what was going on. But uh, they had to restrain me at certain points so I wouldn't pull out my tubes and stuff, which I did at certain points. But yeah, to answer your question, about 5 weeks all told.
Well, then kind of answers the next question: is what kind of emotions, what thoughts were going through your mind at this time? I just remember back to when I was going through the bacterial meningitis, and I was in the hospital, and the wild dreams I was having because I'd lost my vestibular balance, my inner ear balance. Every time I fell asleep, it just felt like I was falling. So I'd have these dreams of falling and wake up leaping out of the bed. Uh, for you, not only were you the paranoia, it must have been feeding other emotions as well, or exacerbating. You're the provider, the protector, of course, the strong one in many different ways. And here you are. It must have been pretty. It must have felt pretty helpless. What was going through your mind?
I mean, you nailed it. One, as far as the paranoia exacerbating things, with my dreams. Well, actually, before I was actually fully sedated, I was still, I guess, semi sedated, or at least it was the delirium from the disease. But my mom and my wife were both in the hospital with me. And it's funny now, but at the time I was very concerned that there was some sort of patient abuse going on, uh, just probably because of the paranoia. And I wanted to make sure that my wife was who she said she was. So, I could hear her voice. I couldn't see her very well for whatever reason. This did affect my vision.
Hmm.
Um, I have a pre-existing eye condition, uh, which is genetic, but this also made my vision significantly dimmer and more affected at the worst of it. So anyway, the funny bit is, because this happened after Christmas, my wife and I were sitting down to watch a Christmas movie, and we pulled one up from like Amazon Prime or something, and it was called Holiday in Handcuffs. It was atrocious, Aaron. It was the worst holiday movie I've ever seen. I couldn't get through more than 15 minutes. Um, so that was my like two-factor authentication for my wife, where I was like, "What was the name of the movie that we started to watch?" But it was just really bad. Um, so anyway,
That was the call sign, the password for trust.
exactly, exactly. She
What's
passed.
the worst movie ever for Christmas? All right, you pass.
Yeah. So that was one. And as far as what I remember and what was going through my mind, I had dreams of like being stolen and taken away to like a circus, is what it was represented, or how it was represented in my mind. But being kidnapped and put in the back of a truck and driven away, uh, I, looking back on it now, quite confident it was a result of the paranoia and being restrained. I remember a different dream of being in like the the not the galley, but like the brig, like where they hold prisoners and pirate ships, uh, and there being other prisoners, and I had to lead them out. And how we did that was ripping out our tubes, the NG tube, and I actually did that while I was dreaming, and the nurse was none too happy. Uh, so all sorts of weird things like that. And then as far as the protector bit, glad you said it, because I know you've got young boys at home. I've got three young girls, and when I was cognizant enough, um, especially on the other side of the of sedation in the ICU, to understand what was all happening to me, I was worried for them more than anything. Where I didn't know how they were gonna get by. Uh, I wanted to make sure we had enough income coming in. It was all just the world was crashing down around us, and you know, my wife and girls showed me what they're made of, and they are made of tough stuff. But it weighed on me pretty heavy.
How were your wife and your kids dealing with this?
So my wife, especially the night that they put me on life support, uh, it hit her really hard. She'll tell you, she was made a single parent, and just had to make do. And she had a really hard time, especially that first night where I was put on life support. I'm really grateful that one of the nurses, I think she was the charge nurse in the ICU, you could tell she'd been at it a while. She sat my wife down and told, Ashley is my wife's name, told Ashley, like, hey, look, you can't be alone tonight. Call someone. Then Ashley was going to say, no, I'll be okay, because it was 2 or 3 in the morning. And the nurse was insistent, like, no, call someone. And Ashley and I are both glad that she did. She called my parents, and God bless my parents. They came running from, they live in about an hour away, but they dropped it all and came over. And my kids surprised me. Uh, one of my daughters, we started with twins. So Mary Claire is very logical sometimes. So because of the chemotherapy, I've got a full beard, but the chemo made all my hair fall out. So no beard, no eyebrows, only a couple eyelashes hanging on. And Ashley was telling my girls, so Daddy's beard fell out, and Mary Claire just asked, but where did it go? And Ashley clarified, it just fell out. It wasn't good enough. No, no. Where did it go? Mary Claire needed an explanation of the logistics. Where's the supply chain of this beard? Um, But when they came for visits, we planned it. There's a great organization at the hospital that tried to make the ICU a whole lot less scary, and planned activities for them. Um, it was still a lot for Mary Claire and for my youngest, but my other twin, Ellie, she was the first one who was comfortable enough to come see me. And I looked so different, Aaron, like not only with the hair loss, but also you can imagine losing 40 pounds. I looked skeletal and just not like the daddy that she was familiar with. So it took her a few minutes, but she came over, she held my hand. I lost it. I just started sobbing. But through the whole experience, it was hard for all of them. But they just showed me that they were surprisingly strong, which I'm proud to say.
Did she know the password?
She didn't know the password, but I went easy on her.
No, that's good. How old are your twins?
The oldest two are 6. When this all went down, they were 5, and the youngest was 3.
Mine are 5 right now. So,
There you go.
yeah, I can imagine how confused. Yeah, they're little. They don't understand this kind of stuff. It's like, Dad, come. It's time to come play, and not time to sleep. Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. So, was this situation like an episode of House where they having trouble diagnosing or uh, you know finding the um, figuring out how to treat or was it just over the 5 or so weeks was just battling with the best course medications and treatments they had.
Yeah, actually, it kind of was an episode of House in the beginning. Um, HLH, especially in adults, is so rare that we don't really have a good database of research around it. There is a protocol in place for treatment, but to even get to the treatment part, as you say, you got to figure out the diagnosis. So I do remember a good part of the workup. Um, this was prior to life support, and it was a number of chest X-rays, CTs, blood draws, and plenty of those. Ultimately, I think it's not like it came down to one test, but one of the tests that was very helpful was a bone marrow biopsy. So I had to drill into the back of my like hip crest, my pelvic bone, take out a sample. I was also like, I had active bleeds during this. Um, Forgetting the proper term, but uh, a lot of the bleeds were up in my towards my larynx, in my throat. But when the hematologist who did the bone marrow biopsy was trying to go in, it was made a lot harder, I was told later, because I just had those bleeds and she had to staunch the bleeding and try to keep going and all that stuff. Hats off to her. She was a true professional, and she continues to be one. But yeah, through those tests is how they landed on HLH. And then there's a protocol from 1994. It was updated, I think, in 2004. Largely chemotherapy, steroids, some monoclonal antibodies, and a couple of other things. A bone marrow biopsy, if it were genetic in a primary form of HLH, you'd need a bone marrow biopsy to have a chance of curing it. Um, it was something we got the wheels in motion for, but didn't have to use. And touch wood, hopefully don't ever have to. But yeah, an episode of House is a good description, actually.
That's an interesting piece of information that the uh, most up-to-date protocol is almost 20 years old. That's pretty rare. So at this time, before the illness, you've been bodybuilding, you've been working out for years since you were a teenager. You became a physical trainer, physical therapist, and um, when did was somebody told you, the doctors and nurses had told you that the only reason you pulled through was because of your muscle mass?
I think it was said at least once. And again, some of the memory is hazy, either by a doctor, by a nurse. but especially when we talked about having to get through the worst of the ICU, because to put a little extra color on it too, excuse me, I mentioned I couldn't, I was so ill that they couldn't give me the full dose of the chemo as per the protocol because I just couldn't have handled it. And I also wasn't responding initially to treatments. It just kept getting worse, more organ failure, to the point where it was mostly a discussion between the doctors and my parents at the time. My wife found out about it afterwards, but we were on the last treatment option before it was just palliative and just about making me comfortable. And it was going to happen the way it was going to happen. So, um, given all that, and knowing how much weight I lost and how I looked, because there wasn't much to me when I woke up. Uh, and again, because give an example, uh, it was a struggle to sit. Like, I was very bedbound. I couldn't actually sit up. It took a whole lot of time and effort to get the strength to sit up, the endurance to stay seated. Um, Holding my phone, I had an iPhone 11, not the heaviest phone in the world, but I had a hard time keeping that up with my hands. So we were pretty close to ground zero there. And yeah, I'm pretty sure it was said at least once by the medical team. Uh, and apparently, I heard from my parents, I also earned the nickname Miracle Man, because how things turned around and where we started. Like, that just was pretty surprising for all of them.
All right. So they finally found a protocol that worked, and you're well enough to leave the hospital. You're did you start gaining weight just from nutrients in the hospital, or I mean, you said over 40 pounds in the hospital while trying to survive. Was this it's like I remember the Lance Armstrong book? It's not about the bike.
Hmm.
He used to be a swimmer, and he had an entirely different physique. The cancer treatments just broke him all the way down, and then he came back as a cyclist, and he could build up the muscles completely differently. What happened to your body after? Where were you as far as fitness wise, and what did you do to come back to physical fitness the way you are now?
Yeah, it's been a long road, and in some ways, it's still definitely continuing. Um, the nutrition piece, or gaining weight rather, that was a struggle also because it's not something that most of us think about until we're in it, whatever the circumstances. But if you lie in bed for 5 weeks and you don't eat or swallow or drink, your throat musculature, your esophagus will atrophy, and that's what happened to me. Also, because I was intubated, then switched to a trach, um, and I was a choking hazard where I couldn't have anything by mouth for, I think it ended up being about a month and a half, where I had to retrain those muscles because I could have aspirated or choked and caused an infection and stuff like that. So nutrition in the early stages, both in the hospital and afterwards, even once I got the ability back to have things by mouth, it was supplemented by an NG tube, that tube from my nose down to my stomach. Eventually, we switched that to a G tube, where they had to put a tube right through my abdomen into my stomach and supplement with kind of like Ensure. I forget the brand, but a supplement. Um, and then eventually, when I was able to eat enough just by mouth, we stopped the supplementation. And as far as the training, it was really basic, like I, learning how to sit up and having the endurance. I had a whole team of physios, which was another head trip because I am a physio by trade. So to be the patient now, especially in this stage where this context was quite a trip, but had to learn how to stand up. Had a We were standing up for all of 3 seconds and then back down because my blood pressure wouldn't stay. And then we were learning how to take steps because I didn't have enough strength to go up on my toes or even lift my foot really. So I was just shuffling along, and we worked our way from that. And
Hmm.
then leaving the hospital, it was still more sit and stands from the bed. It was, real light yellow banded exercises for my arms. And it took about a month and a half of doing that to even be to the point where I could go back in the gym and hold on to an empty barbell, which was a pretty big accomplishment, especially because I've trained I've trained with weights for football in high school, and then to get bigger and stronger, more, to look aesthetically pleasing in university. Then I trained for bodybuilding. I never competed, but then found powerlifting around 2014, and I've stayed with that ever since. So getting a barbell in my hand felt like, uh, I would say it'd be too generous to say that coming home, because I still felt very far removed from where I was, but it was familiar, and that was good at least.
This was just a year ago. Uh,
Yeah.
how long did it take you to get back into? Are you in peak physical condition, whatever that might mean?
I wouldn't say peak, but we're getting closer. And I again weighed about 193 pounds. Lift wise, my best squat was about 415 pounds. Best bench was only 275, and deadlift was about 473 or 475. So now we're talking here in March of 2024. My best deadlift, I'd say, is probably around 455. That's come back the quickest. My squat, I hit 325 for a pretty smooth single about a month ago. So some room to go, but still coming. Bench, I'd say probably about 220. So not at the peak yet. I'm weighing about 177, 178 pounds. So, another 12 to 14 pounds to go there. And yeah, coming out of the hospital May 1st of 2023, and then working this process, you hear of slash see research saying that it's easier to get back to a place where you've been before, whether it's strength levels, amount of muscle in your body. It also works if you have a certain amount of fat tissue. Um, your body is more readily going to where it's been. And I experienced that full on, where I was pleasantly surprised to see how some of the strength and muscle started to come back, but still work in the process.
I can actually feel. I can definitely empathize and I sympathize with that whole experience because in 2015, I was running marathons. I just finished the Boston Marathon, and then months later, I came home in a wheelchair and I could not walk. Just like you were describing, I couldn't stand my feet. No, my balance was so bad that I had to use the trekking poles I used to take into the mountains just to get, yeah, to the bathroom. And so I know that must have been really frustrating. How has this whole experience served you?
It's a great question, and I knew you'd ask it just because of you know what you talk about, which I love. For the record, I'd say how it served me is it's punctuated the power of strength in a way that I never thought that it would. Um, I mentioned it when we started talking about the best life insurance policy you never hope, or you hope you never have to cash in on, and that's one thing that I keep coming back to. It's also served me to really put life and time in perspective. Um, I don't know if you're familiar or if you're a fan of Stoicism when it comes to philosophy, but I've, I've been a fan, and have enjoyed reading about it for a number of years. But there's a phrase, memento mori. Um, just remember, you must die, is what it means in Latin. And the Stoics use that to communicate the idea or the truth that we all die. We don't know how much time we have, and we don't know how life plays. So it's meant to be uh, encouragement to live intentionally and to not put off the things that really matter and to not get caught up so much in the things that don't. And coming on the other side of this, uh, especially with my family, it's helped me to really key in to making memories, the memories that we've wanted to and have talked about for a long time, and not just keep putting it off. Oh, we'll do it in the summer. We'll do it next year. Some of them we'll have to plan longer term, but to really prioritize making these memories, because I found out firsthand that, tomorrow or next year isn't guaranteed. To the point where I got memento mori tattooed on my forearm a few weeks ago, just to keep me thinking about it.
That's an incredible reminder.
Yeah.
Tell me what's next for you? What are you aiming to do? Go back to the same level of fitness you once were at? Move beyond? Tell this incredible story? What do you want to do with the experience you've been through?
I I'll tell you, I'm excited about a number of things related to that. So I'm when it comes to my coaching business, because I do that full time. Um, my business partner, he's now my business partner because his name is John Flagg. Uh, he stepped in to in a big way when I was in the thick of the ICU, and merged our businesses because we do very similar things, primarily working with strength athletes or people who want to get stronger. So we've got plans to continue to scale that up, work with more people, and have impact on people's lives kind of on the ground like that. Um, Part of what I find fun is, as a powerlifting coach, we've got a number of athletes who are competing at the world level, national level, local level, all levels really. So I'm excited to keep supporting them in their journeys. I'm excited to get back on the powerlifting platform myself. I've got my first meet scheduled for May 25th of this year, and then a second one for August 10th. I might squeak a third one in towards the end of the year, but no particular numbers. And only intention really is just to have fun and get into a cadence of competing regularly again. And then, I mentioned briefly, my genetic eye condition. It's a progressive thing. It's called choroideremia. There's no cure for it currently, and it is a blinding disease. So, at some point it'll blind me to either a total or some degree. So, thinking about uh, future directions, especially in the context of what this last year has looked like, um, writing, speaking, they've always been things I've enjoyed, and I'm going to explore that more. I may do some writing, whether nonfiction, fiction, or both. We'll kind of have to see. But I know I want to use my story and what I have to share as widely as I can to positively impact people. And you know, I got a second chance, so I want to use it as best I can.
I can certainly appreciate the effort to get the story out to inspire others. I kind of live by the mantra, the story of your struggle may someday be the blueprint for someone else's survival. And you certainly have a very impactful, very important story. Uh, when it comes to the coaching and the training, are you training others for, you said competition? Is that for uh, weightlifting, like strength? Or is this more of like the bodybuilder competition, or both? Or who do you teach? Who do you train?
Really, all of it. So we primarily focus on strength athletes. So sport wise, that'll typically be powerlifting. Those are the competitions with the squat, bench press, and deadlift. We do have weightlifters, the ones who do the squat, or sorry, the snatch and clean and jerk. That's the one in the Olympics. We have some people who have aspirations to compete in bodybuilding. Um, they mostly work with us when they want to go into an off season, increase their strength, that sort of thing. And then people kind of across the spectrum, anyone who wants to get stronger, we've got a number of people who are, or moms who are pregnant for the first time or second, moms who are postpartum. We've got people who want to compete in strength sports like powerlifting, weightlifting, or even strongman competitions, and also run 5 and 10K races. We've got someone prepping for a marathon right now. So a lot of different flavors, but all kind of united by strength as the common theme.
I was going to ask if you train for endurance, you know, competitions, more runners, which is not to build mass, but uh, asking for a friend.
Yeah, we do, and it's actually been kind of a budding passion of ours because we've got a team, John, myself, and a few other coaches, um, where it started with a few clients who wanted to be able to run races, um, and there have been more and more of them, and it's been nice and fun to blend both the strength training and the endurance training and match it to the goals that they've got. So yeah, definitely in our wheelhouse.
Well, I gotta tell you, uh, this is a pretty new reason to put on the list for getting into the gym. So I don't know how high I'll rank up on other people's good reasons to get fit, but I tell you what, it sounds like it saved your life. Jared, I've really enjoyed having you on the show. Really appreciate you telling your story. If others want to learn more, they want to catch your podcast, maybe uh, inquire about getting trained, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Instagram is probably the best place to come find me. Jared.unbreakablestrength is my handle. I'm an open book, so if you got questions about my story, about coaching, about anything and everything, feel free to shoot me a message. Would love to hear from you there. And if you're looking for more podcast listens, keep listening to Point of Impact, obviously. But then after that, Rebuild Stronger is the podcast that John and I run. So we've got some episodes about both my story, and then also we get into nerdy, geeky meathead territory about training and all that. So put that on the the second up list.
Excellent. Well, one more time, thank you very much for being on the show and sharing your story. I really appreciate you being on. And uh, I would have to look you up for a little more of my own strength conditioning.
Let me know. Would love to have that conversation. And Aaron, thanks for inviting me on, man. I've enjoyed this. Just appreciate you and really what you're doing, your mission here. It's awesome.
All right. Well, take care, Jared.